You keep using the term, quote, commercial content. Is that in the bill?
Commercial content? Yes, commercial content. It's what we're trying to define to see if it's replacing or not, things that you see
So
elsewhere.
commercial content is a legal term used in the bill?
It's a term used in the bill, yes.
Okay, and how do you define commercial content?
Well, we said we're giving guidance to the CRTC based on if the revenues based, if you find this elsewhere, and the unique number. So it's not one of the three. We're giving this to the CRTC, and they have to take those three in consideration when they draft the regulations.
Okay, and what is that revenue that you're looking for in order to know whether or not it's going to be regulated?
There's no number.
There's no number?
No.
So who will determine that number?
It has nothing to do with a number. No. It's not determination of a number.
Minister, you just said that it was based on revenue, whether or not it was commercial
yes,
content.
But well, if
so what is that revenue
there's
number?
Revenues, the CRTC will take those three criteria. They will draft the regulations that will take in consideration the three elements.
So what's that revenue cutoff?
There's no revenue cutoff. You know that.
Well, I'm asking you for clarification. When you're saying commercial content is what this bill is going after, what's that number? How much revenue do you want them to have to make in order to be counted as commercial content?
Because those are direction criteria given to the CRTC to draft the regulations.
So it's up to the CRTC to determine that monetary amount?
They're not there to determine a specific
They were not going to determine a specific amount.
And again, even if an online creator would make a lot of money with it, if it's not used as a substitute or you don't find it on Spotify, it has nothing to do.
Minister, sorry, I'm going to let you clarify once again. How are you going to determine, at which revenue threshold are you going to determine whether it's commercial content?
Commercial content is more than just revenue.
But you said that is one of the three criteria. So if all three have to be there...
Just a second, we do have a point of order. Mr. Biddle on a point of order.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think you discussed the talking over the witnesses thing and kind of let it go now a few times, but there's been a chronic interrupting of the minister after the question is asked and should be able to answer his questions.
Thank you. And we will try to have the question and comments about the same amount as questions, and we will try to keep the microphones one at a time just for the sake of the interpretation. Ms. Thomas.
I trust that time is not taken off of my clock. Minister, you're very confusing to those that are watching, because on one hand you're saying revenue will be accounted for and taken into consideration along with two other criteria, and on the other hand you're saying no, revenue doesn't need to be considered. So can you please be clear? Is revenue going to be considered as one of the criteria to determine whether or not content is covered
I don't
by
think
this
I'm
bill?
confusing, Ms. Thomas. I think
my question is simple,
I think
Minister.
I've been very clear.
What is the revenue threshold?
What is the revenue threshold that will have you support the bill?
What is the revenue
Would you support
threshold?
the bill in either consideration or never?
Minister, my question is toward you. What is the revenue threshold?
I told you it's one of the criteria that
I know it's one of the criteria.
It's one of the criteria.
So what is that criteria? What's that number? What's that revenue threshold?
You've asked the same question probably 8 times, the same one you filibustered last week. It's not going to get you anywhere.
So you don't know the revenue threshold?
I did answer your question.
You didn't.
Yes,
What's the number then?
I did 8 times.
So what's the number? What's the revenue threshold?
It's one of the 3 criteria that the CRTC takes to generate the regulations, which will apply then.
Right. So what is that monetary amount that you're going to be able to determine whether or not it applies to it?
I've answered your question. You know very well that.
I don't, because
Yes,
it's
you
not
do.
in Bill C-11. There's no revenue threshold given. What's the monetary amount?
It's one of the 3 criteria.
If someone makes $100 million in revenue, if someone
It's one
makes
of the 3 criteria.
$50,000 in revenue, $30,000 in
and
revenue,
for online
what's the threshold?
creators-
Who's in, who's out?
And for online creators, that wouldn't change anything because they're excluded, even if you like to say to people falsely that they're included. They're not.
So in
it
order
doesn't
to
change
determine
anything.
if someone is producing, quote, commercial content, which is the term you like to use, even though it's actually not defined in the bill, but you get away. It's actually very sneaky of you to use that term here today.
Isn't that a personal attack?
Commercial.
No, that's not a personal attack, Sneaky. No. I would have said it is.
Minister, I'm just asking a very simple question. I'm just asking if you can provide me with that revenue threshold, the monetary amount.
I answer, but I don't think that anything that I say will have you
I think I missed the monetary amount.
support
Could you
the
give
bill
that
or
dollar
anything.
figure again?
You said that this bill needs to die 1,000 deaths, Ms. Thomas.
Could you give me that monetary amount?
What's the point?
And you said that
don't
we
want
needed
this
to have a
bill pass
conversation, and I'm
anyways.
trying to have a conversation with you, Mr.
I'm trying
Rodriguez.
to.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Biddle, on a point of order.
I hear Ms. Thomas saying she wants a conversation. The minister, and again, for the translators, perhaps we should ask a question, let the minister answer, and not talk over him.
And we do have about 20 seconds left, so Ms. Thomas, if you want to take the last 20 seconds. And
I was just hoping that Mr. Rodriguez could give me a dollar figure.
Is that the same question? I think it is, right?
What is that
And there will
dollar
be also
figure in order to
consultations?
determine if it is commercial content and therefore captured by this bill?
Once the CRTC takes the 3 criteria to establish regulations, there'll also be consultations.
I recognize
so all
that.
The discussions
One of those
will happen.
criteria is a
I'm sure you'd be
monetary
with
looking
amount.
that,
forward
that's
to
the 5 minutes
No,
for that round.
no